What's going on, guys? My name is Zach, and in this video we're going to be going over how to install the P3 gauge on a Volkswagen Mk7 GLI. Now before we get started, I do want to go over some of the things that are going to be included in the kit, some options you're going to have when purchasing from P3, and the tools you're going to need to install them. The first thing that comes included in the kit is going to be the display itself. Now, for the purposes of this video, P3 has already pre-installed the display in an existing OEM vent, but if you would like further instruction on how to properly install your display in your existing vent, head over to p3gauges.com and check out their install guide. The next part of the kit is going to be the control box and the OBD2 port wire harness. This plug-and-play system will go from the display to your control box to your wire harness, which will plug directly into your existing OBD2 port. With this setup, you will be able to read from the map sensor and from the charge pipe sensor with just a few button presses. One thing to keep in mind is if you do want to read from the map sensor, you're going to be limited from vacuum to 22.5 psi. That is the limitation of your existing map sensor. If you want to read more boost than that, you can read from the charge pipe sensor, but you are going to lose the option of being able to read vacuum. For this install, we actually decided to go with the analog boost sensor option, which will give us the best of both worlds. The analog boost tap will tie directly into the same port as your existing map sensor, but we'll be able to read from vacuum all the way to 80 psi, which is nuts. For this option, you are going to need the boost tap kit, which comes with boost tubing and the boost tap. So some of the tools you're going to need to install this kit are going to be the trim removal tools. You can pretty much get these anywhere. I opted just to go right through P3's website to make it easier. If you are going to be installing the analog boost tap, you are going to need a 4mm Allen key. One of the main reasons why we decided to even go with P3 is because they do so much more than some ordinary boost gauge. For one, they maintain that same OEM plus style that I'm looking for in my car. Not to mention they're easy to use, easy to install, and easy to reverse if I ever want to go back to stock. Plus, they can do things like read engine codes, air intake temp, coolant temp, and exhaust temp. So these are just some of the features why we decided to go with P3. Obviously, there's so much more. So let's go install this bad boy. All right, guys, so we are now in the car, and the first thing we're gonna wanna do is remove the headlight switch. Then we're gonna go and remove the side panel here. Let's do it. So in order to remove the headlight switch, push in like that, twist this way, and this whole thing should just pop right out like that. Just be careful not to pull the wires too tautly. Okay, next step is gonna be the side panel. You're gonna wanna take your trim removal tools. You have a bunch of different options from P3. I'm gonna use this one, see if we can get in there, and there are 3 main clips that we're gonna declip. You're gonna want even pressure all the way through. And just like that, we're in. So the next thing we have to do is actually take off this carbon piece, and then we're gonna remove this piece and keep going. And that comes off just like that. 3 clips going in there, and we do have 1 screw as well. All right, next part is gonna be this piece here. So this piece is a pain. What you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna come into the side here, pull in. There's 3 main tabs that pop this thing off. I went ahead and already pre-popped it because it was a pain. I'm sweating trying to do this. But when you do, you just wanna be mindful that when it does come off, you do have your ambient lighting here and your wires right here. And these are your 3 tabs, 1, 2, and there's 1 in the corner. Next, we're gonna take the T20 and remove this screw. All right, next thing we wanna do is remove this bottom piece. This is gonna give us access to our OBD2 port. And you should be able to just put your fingers in the bottom here and just pull back. And that should come right off. All right, so now we got this piece off here. This whole unit is actually 1 piece. The 2019 GLI is the only one that actually is made like this. So essentially, the bezel is connected to this one piece, and what you can do is just push it off enough where this whole panel is loose enough where you'll have access to your vent. Now you do want to be careful not to flex this too much, because this piece does go all the way back to where your display is on your center console. So that is all one unit. You don't have to remove the whole thing. If you just take off enough here, you'll see that there's enough play to be able to get access to this vent. All right, so in order to get the vent away from the actual bezel, you're gonna have to kind of pry in here and remove 6 different clamps. Once that's separated from the vent, you should be able to pull this whole piece away enough to just get out the vent. So after you've got your old vent out, or your existing vent, and then you're gonna wanna install your main display, obviously. Once you have it attached in its housing, you're gonna wanna thread the cable through here. All right, so important thing, make sure your wire is totally through. And what I'm gonna do first is snap on the bezel, just so we know it's a perfect flush seal against the top before we snap it in like that. Perfect. Just gonna go ahead and push and lock. And that looks pretty damn good. All right, so now we're gonna take our OBD2 port wire harness and we're gonna plug in the OBD2 port. We're gonna take these cables and run them up through the side here and out. And this is where your control box is gonna sit right up in here. So next, you're gonna take your control box, plug in the one side, plug in the other side. So once you have your wires in, you can attach some double-sided tape to the one side, and we're just gonna stick it right there. So I went ahead and managed all the cables. P3 was nice enough to give us some zippy ties to make sure everything was nice and organized here. So that looks good. Before we button up the rest of the dash, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on to see if it actually works. All right, looks good. Looks like we are reading vacuum currently, so that's great. And if I step on the gas, seems to be working pretty well. We did it. All right, so if you guys didn't get the analog boost tap, we're pretty much done. All we gotta do is put back on our dimmer switch, which we really didn't have to take out unless you were wiring it directly to the dim wire, which I'm not gonna do. Instead, you can hold this top right button and it'll dim the display. And then you can hold it again to bring it back up to full brightness. So that's pretty much it. If you guys want to continue watching, I'll go ahead and actually be installing the boost tap from this point forward. So we're gonna go ahead and start buttoning up the rest of this. What you're gonna wanna do is make sure that it is unbuttoned and pops right in. We're gonna go ahead and plug this guy back in here. All right, now we got the under trim in. Let's go ahead and install this little carbon piece here. Just 3 little snaps, and that goes right in. That's pretty much it. You're gonna install now your sidewall. I'm not gonna do that yet, because again, I'm gonna go ahead and be installing the analog boost tap. We're gonna start with the boost tubing. This is probably the hardest part of the whole thing because of how inconvenient it is to actually feed this tube through a grommet, through your firewall, and into the engine on the other side. In order to do that, the best thing that I've found is either to use a wire hanger or like a long, skinny wooden stick that won't break. And you're gonna wanna take an X-Acto knife. You can actually take a little incision and run that through the grommet, and you'll have a little tiny hole where you can then feed the boost tubing through that hole and into the engine bay. Before you do that, you are going to want to remove your battery so you can get access to that area. All right, so this is directly underneath the fuse box on the inside. Essentially, we have the boost tubing here. I've already ran it through to make sure that it was going to work. As you can see right there, the tube is going through that grommet. I put an X-Acto knife in that little guy, made a little slit, and just fed the tube right through, and I'll show you what it looks like on the other side. This is the boost tap. I found a wooden stick to run it through, just taped it on, which allowed me to go right through the grommet and fish the tube all the way through. And before we figure out exactly where we're gonna run it, it's gonna take off the engine cover. So the first thing we're gonna do is take off this wire. In order to do that, you're gonna push this tab back, and then you can actually push on it a little bit. It'll release here, and then you should be able to just pull it right off. Step one done. So this screw here is a T20. And now there's two clamps right here that are holding this whole thing down. You wanna separate them like that. You're gonna wanna almost use pressure here to lift up, and then these two pull out. Then once you pass that threshold, it just comes right off. You're not gonna wanna actually touch this, so keep this safe for now. Now how this is gonna work is this is the piece that's gonna go first. This is gonna go down into this, and the tube is gonna be coming out of this guy here. So what we're gonna wanna do is screw him on. And there is an O-ring right there. They do give you two. There's already one on here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that on. See how these now connect straight down like this. There is an O-ring on here. We're gonna use the existing O-ring. Push that down into place. Nice and flush all the way around. Looks great. So now, you're just gonna wanna push this straight down in. Make sure it lines up with that screw hole in the back. And it should just fit. So they give you the supplied screw. You're gonna need a 4mm Allen key. And you do wanna be careful because the map sensor is plastic. That's not going anywhere. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and snap this back on, slide that thing back down. That's attached. All right, so I went ahead and connected the boost tap tubing to that output, and then I am gonna run it underneath the intake hose and then around the battery, and it should sit flush against the CPU right there. All right, so we got the engine cover on, we got the battery back installed, we got the tube running from here, again, underneath the intake and around the battery over here, and it just tucks nicely right in there. Looks pretty clean, out of everything's way. Now right off the bat, you are gonna get a bunch of error codes on your car because you did remove the battery and put it back in. As you drive, those codes will go away, assuming you did everything correctly. So currently we're still in Boost Digital. Let's see if we can access the Boost Analog. And we're gonna configure. Go to Boost D and go to Boost. All right, now we're in Boost A mode. And it looks like it's working. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and install back my panels and we'll be good to go.